Viewer discretion is advised. Around 10 p.m. on September 28, 2021, Brandon Lopez was murdered by the Anaheim Police Department in Santa Ana, California. Earlier that evening, Brandon got into an argument with his girlfriend. He left the house and she reported the car being stolen. At 5:58 p.m., he was pulled over on the corner of Bristol and Santa Ana Boulevard. For the next 4 hours, Brandon was in his car dealing with his mental health crisis. And around 9:50 p.m., Anaheim Police Department took over the situation. They deployed tear gas and flashbangs to force Brandon out of the car. And just after he exited, the police of Anaheim can be heard saying, "Gun, gun, gun," and they opened fire on Brandon. Brandon Lopez died at the scene. This did not have to happen, and we are going to speak with Brandon's mother and his cousin about what happened that night and who Brandon is and what the community can do for justice for Brandon Lopez.
Well, Brandon was born December 2nd, 1987. He was 33 when he passed. Character. He was the youngest of our 3 children. He has 2 older sisters. And he was not an expected addition to our family, but he was a blessing in so many ways. He became a father young. He was 17 when he became a father for the first time. He has 4 beautiful children, and he loved those children so much. His passions, he had so many passions. He was the typical Sagittarius. He loved everything. He really loved music. He liked skateboarding when he was younger. He was heavily into music. He loved tattoo art. He was so good at his craft. He loved everything. There was just so many things that he enjoyed. If you have a chance to look back at his pictures, he just constantly had a smile on his face. It wasn't very often that you saw a scowl or him, having a serious look. He was just Brandon. I don't know how other. He was a character.
How old are his children now?
Marcus will be 17 in May. He has a 13-year-old and 2 12-year-olds. And it's been very rough.
As his cousin, Jonathan, were there any moments, memories, specific things, music and joy that you guys resonated with together or in hanging out?
Yeah. When we were kids, my grandparents, my abuelita and my abuelita Indelisa and my grandfather Enrique, they're super conservative. So when we were kids, we couldn't really listen to hip hop at home when they were there. But every time we'd go to visit my Uncle Tony and my Aunt Jana, we'd hang out with Brandon, and they were at work and we were out of school. And this is during the summers when we were kids. And he had this huge, stack of CDs that he was collecting in like the old leather cases. And you would flip through them for days and just find all sorts of different music that he'd listen to. And when we were kids, he got us into, Tupac Shakur, Nate Dogg, Dog Pound, a lot of West Coast hip hop. And he liked funk a lot. And so when we were kids, that's what we would listen to. We'd listen to music. We'd play with tech decks and we'd skateboard outside. And so that was the, 90s childhood for a lot of us. And a lot of MTV too. A lot of music videos we would watch as kids. And one of the particular memories I remember of my cousin Brandon was I remember watching Lauryn Hill's acoustic performance for the first time as it happened on TV with him. And we were just too young to understand the musical brilliance that Lauryn was and is. But that's the type of memories that I have with Brandon as a kid when it comes to music. There was never a dull moment with him. It was always music. Something around us was always around. It was always centered around music and bumping, your favorite songs. And when he passed, it's why music played such a big role. And in remembering him, and in honoring his life, music played a very big role. And there was one artist in particular, the Philharmonic. And in 2017, I did an event called Roses in the Concrete. And my cousin Brandon was working at a tattoo shop that my friend happened to own. And he didn't know this was my cousin. And it was called Pharaoh's Ink. And I went to the tattoo shop, and my cousin Brandon was a tattoo artist there. And so I told him, this is my friend's shop. And my friend didn't know this was my cousin. And so I had an event that weekend, which was all around how does hip hop and music and the arts, pull kids away from the prison system. And I remember inviting my cousin and telling him, hey, if you want to come through, we're having an event, Common is going to be there and a couple of different artists. And we just talked about hip hop, and that was one of the most reinvigorating things I had with Brandon, was that experience of sharing. And I remember telling him about some of the artists, and he ended up hitting me up on Instagram later, telling me that he really liked this artist, the Philharmonic. And when he passed, the Philharmonic flew down and performed at the event for Brandon. And yeah, Brandon loved music. And so today being the 6th month, I went by his mural and I played him some music.
That's incredibly powerful. Oh my God. That's what, when she was sharing music, that was instantly what came to mind, is like wondering what. And it's good to know hip hop and Tupac and
well, his music tastes were varied. All of my children they had the Beatles shoved down their throats. Beatle fanatic, and I'm just as much as a music fanatic as he was. And the good thing is all of our children were they were introduced to all sorts of music, traditional Mexican music, traditional Hawaiian music. He liked Stevie Ray Vaughan. He liked blues. He liked Hendrix. From time to time he would play Zeppelin. Because every once in a while he'd play Depeche Mode, Duran Duran. I mean, his tastes were they were varied because we introduced the kids to the different genres. So yeah, he that's one thing I have to say. He did inherit my sense of music as far as that's concerned. He was a massive music lover. He just loved music.
between that and the skateboarding, I know I'd get along very well. That's like all I need, music and a skateboard. So that's really good to hear.
On the topic of skateboarding, I have to share, because now that you say that, I know who his favorite skaters were, because I remember when we were kids, he didn't really like video games, and Tony Hawk Pro Skater had just came out. And but what he did like was he had VHS tapes of his favorite skateboarders. And there was a video that he used to love to watch, and it was Daewon Song versus Rodney Mullen. And his favorite skateboarder was Daewon Song.
Wow.
Yeah. Back in the day, he liked Daewon Song, and his favorite skateboarding trick was the hard flip. And one time when we were kids, we were probably like 12 years old. He was probably 12. He had bleach blonde tips at the time. So he must have been 11, 12.
Yeah, about there.
Yeah, it was like 11, 12. And we had went toward the courthouse here in Santa Ana, and he hard flipped the stairs there. And I remember we just booked it home on our skateboards, but we were kids, and he had gotten inspiration from the Daewon Song, Rodney Mullen skate video where they were battling each other. But yeah, when you brought that up, it just made me think his favorite skateboarder was Daewon Song, and he also liked Eric Costin a lot.
Yeah, I know that one. Definitely.
Yeah.
Rocket shoes. Wow. Oh, that's so wild. Um, going to it, I wasn't going to the date 6 months ago, September 28th, 2021. Where was that location? What city? And I guess what was the department that initially was there? And if we could maybe just go from there, whoever would want to describe or explain.
Yeah. If you don't mind, Auntie, I can answer this one.
Yeah, that's fine.
So
Go
it's
ahead.
September 28th of 2021. I had received an email of a agency assist, and it's pretty common as an elected official to receive, these types of emails, and in most cases, a lot of these situations, they in the city of Santa Ana, when I see agency assist, it's because there's a fire, and another agency is brought in to help out. And in this particular instance, I had just finished my workday, and in that particular workday, I was dealing with a mental health crisis with a kid that I was working with at the time. And I remember going to the gym and finding out that this was my family member. And when I arrived to the precinct, Santa Ana PD had contained the situation where Brandon's vehicle was stuck, and they had contained the situation. And the information that was given to the public and that was given to me was that they had contained the situation. Somebody's car got stuck, and that they were trying to get this person out of the car. At this point, I realized it's my family member, and I conveyed this message to the officers there that are Santa Ana PD officers, to which they responded disgustingly by telling me, what makes you more special than anyone else? Get behind the yellow line. There's one officer in particular that had her hand on her gun as she told me this. And I responded to her and said, I'm trying to make sure that you guys don't kill my cousin. I said, he's in his car, looks very distressed. You guys are pointing guns at him. There's just no way to get someone out of a vehicle and help them. And her response was, people kill people every day. If you don't want your neighbors to be traumatized, tell your neighbors to get inside. And I just remember almost feeling hopeless in that moment, because when I arrived, I had the hope that they had valued a life like his, and that they would want to work toward preserving it. And in that moment, it was the first instant of doubt that I had at that precinct. And I remember when she said that, I responded and I said, if you guys do something to my cousin, people are going to see your body cam, and they're going to see this conversation that we're having. And I remember the disregard from that officer. And I went to two other precincts before Anaheim officially got there. And when I went to the two other precincts, I spoke to different officers on both sides. One side of Baker, which was on the side going towards First Street, and on the other side of Baker, which was on the side going towards Civic Center. And I went to the two different precincts, and for some reason, I couldn't communicate to officers. It wasn't being relayed to them that I was his family member, and that my message to them was, we need to continue to de-escalate. Around 9:30, I learned that Anaheim was coming back. And I don't understand what their reasoning was for that. I don't know who called them, but it continues to be a concern. And Anaheim came back, and within minutes, it seemed, the concept of time felt like forever at this point, because I had been there for hours at this point now with my brother. But once Anaheim came, they arrived with fire and with an ambulance. And both of those vehicles had their lights off. There was no siren. And when they arrived, it felt like within 30 minutes, he was killed. And when he was killed, I was called back to the scene on my cell phone. And they said, "Can you confirm this is your cousin?" And I said, "He was my cousin before you shot him." And at that point, I was called back to the side where my Aunt Jonna was. And I saw my Aunt Jonna. And I don't think we really understood what happened. There was still some blind hope that I had that he would survive, or that, ambulance would get there and help him. And it just seemed like the longest unsteady night. I mean, my stomach is turning just talking about it. And the next day after this happened, I learned that he didn't have a gun. We knew he didn't have a gun. And what breaks my heart is how there could be that many officers at a scene, and they could have everything that can work to their advantage. Family members, a mom, mental health professionals like myself. And in addition to that, me being an elected official there, they had everything that could work to their favor, that can make them look like they were competently doing a good job and they saved a man's life. But it meant nothing to them. And what scares me is that a mental health crisis in the hands of police in this country equals death. And that is what occurred on September 28th.
It's never an officer's job to be, I think it goes judge, jury, and executioner, right? And we're all innocent until proven guilty. All of our interactions with police, we're innocent people. Even when we're getting booked and going to jail, we're innocent people all the way until our day in court. And so despite narratives and media trying to portray 1,000 killings, I'm sure a majority of them, they try to portray them in a certain way to show that this person's a bad person, this person's a criminal. These people should not be killed ever. And in the instance of your cousin, and Johanna, your son, it's by far the opposite of measures that should be taken. It's by far the opposite of services that should be available when needing help.
And that's the challenge, is that as we talk about police violence and fatal police interactions, what is the most challenging thing to process about my cousin's loss, that I'm sure a lot of other families that have been victims of Anaheim Police Department struggle with, is oftentimes these officers, they're repeat offenders. There was 4 officers that killed my cousin Brandon on the night of September 28th. Their names are Paul Delgado, Brett Heitman, Caitlin Panov, and Ken Weber. The public can Google their names, and many of their cases will come up, cases that were as recent as 2017. Some of these cases were written off by the district attorney in Orange County. One in particular, Paul Delgado, that has a number of cases that are alarming and concerning, that the public should know about. And I encourage the public to do their research. Police violence and misconduct is one of the most costly things in the country of the United States. It's costing us billions of dollars annually in misconduct and lawsuits. And until there is accountability for these rampant police departments that are killing people in large numbers and paying out lawsuits as a response, we're going to continue to see families traumatized and brutalized in our communities. And we're at a point now where we have to start looking at qualified immunity as organized crime, because that's what it is. And I can assure you my family and members of the community and members across this country are never going to stop fighting for accountability.
There's lots of people that stand there with you, that will go shoulder to shoulder, that have been affected, that haven't been affected, and that know that it's wrong. We pay the police. They're all of our public servants. We pay all of the body cam footage. So until they actually work for us, until that body cam footage actually becomes there for us, the public, I think there's nothing we can do but continue raising awareness and speaking up. I wanted to mention specifically regarding Brandon and what had occurred. Did they try to say that he had a gun on him? Did they try to say that he was a threat to the officers? Was there any discrepancies or anything you wanted to clear up or share regarding that?
So I can answer that question out of an abundance of caution for my aunt. The particulars that we can share are that, like most instances of police violence, one of the most concerning issues we commonly see is before they even determine whether or not someone has a gun, they make the decision that this person has a gun and they proceed to shoot. And then an investigation ensues, and afterward we find out oftentimes these people are unarmed. And thankfully, Assembly Bill 1506, it allows the Attorney General of the state of California to take on police violence, cases of police violence where the victim does not have a firearm and they're independently investigated. And that is what is currently happening now, because Brandon was unarmed. And one of the things that was very challenging was members of our community, family, as we were there at the scene, we all knew he was unarmed. Brandon wasn't somebody who carried a gun. Brandon was an old-fashioned guy. He had children. He wasn't somebody who carried a gun. Brandon was somebody, as much as the media tried, not the media, but as much as, Anaheim Police Department tries to make it out, Brandon was somebody who did respect law enforcement. He's somebody who respected his community. And, when we were kids, it was common for us to, respect, the place that we come from. And that was the toughest thing, is we all knew he wasn't armed. But what we did know is that pointing a gun at somebody, multiple rifles at somebody, and telling them, and swearing at them and telling them to get out of a car isn't conducive to anybody. And like many families, we're tasked with having to pick up the pieces and fight back.
Regarding fighting back, regarding justice, regarding accountability, I know this is, again, it's 6 months. This is beyond new. This is recent. It's still, I'm certain, not even able to get used to the loss that not the loss, I heard someone say it's like, it was someone mentioning that it was Valentina's father, Juan Pablo, but he's like, I didn't lose my daughter, she was taken from me. And it's just so unimaginable. What can people do? How can the community stand behind you, your family, and have any sense of justice for Brandon Lopez?
There's so many different ways to attend your local police commission meetings, your local city council meetings, attend vigils, attend walks, attend protesting, contribute to all the dialogue that's going on to make more people aware and be involved, recognize that reform needs to happen. I think we have a tendency, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm just talking about the public in general. We get numb to seeing these types of instances in the news every day. It just seems like one or two are happening every day, locally, nationally. And it isn't until when it's happened to you that, we just feel like we need to rise up and do something about it. And this situation, this problem with law enforcement just being out of control needs to stop. It just really needs to stop. And people, registered owners, um, residents of these cities, we need to become a lot more active and responsible for making change that is long overdue, change that should have happened not with so much with this instance with my son's death, but many, many times before. And we can talk about just within the Taylor, George Floyd. I mean, there's just so many. Valentina, there's too many. There's just this instance has just happened way too many times, and it's got to stop. Reform just has to happen. And if my son has to be the the one to get it all going, hey, right on, more power. Let's get it going. Let's get it on because it has to change some way, somehow. It just has to happen.
Beautifully said.
If you want to share anything, Jonathan, but I was going to mention in terms of the reform, it could be just general because that's absolutely it as well. Or is there also anything specific or um, anything being focused on specifically regarding reform or thoughts on that? And Jonathan, if you want to touch on anything, please do.
Yeah. There's a number of ways that community members can raise their voice and in turn help raise Brandon's voice. And in raising Brandon's voice, you raise Brianna's, and George, and everyone else that's interconnected to the struggle. There's so many families that if we sat here and we named them all, we would be here all day. And that's the heartbreaking reality of this, the struggle and the fight for accountability. It's a long battle, but there's a number of ways to support. Number one, you support us by saying their name, sharing their stories, and sharing these videos. It helps humanize and bring visibility to people that should have been valued in this country. But unfortunately, we live in a country where it's permissible for a police force to kneel on a black man's neck and to put bullets in a brown man's body, like they did my cousin Brandon. Number two, another way you can help support is when there are actions, vigils, protests, forums. Show up and help with the efforts of accountability, and meet families where they're at. Some families protest, some families, stay indoors. Some families have vigils, some families have events. Meet families where they're at. And when families have actions, go out and support. One of the things people forget is these families didn't choose to be activists. Most of them aren't. They're forced to have the last stage of grief for a lot of these families isn't acceptance, it's activism. And it's not by choice. So that's number two. Number three, for my neighbors that live in Orange County and in Santa Ana and Anaheim, is pay attention to your local elections. There's a lot of dirty politicians that keep these police departments, moving the way that they do. There's a lot of local buy-in from police departments and police unions that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on local elections so that they can ensure that they have a DA that protects them, so that they can have local city council people and mayors that uphold police violence. But people like me are challenging that narrative. I ran against a police officer in 2020 and I took him out of office. And if I had not made the decision to run for office, I think that the former elected probably would have upheld and invalidated the negligent decision to not preserve life. So what we got to do is we got to start running for office. We got to start running for local office from Santa Ana City Council example, City Council, mayors, assembly, Congress, all the way down to the DA. And in addition to that, if you're not up to running for office, look for candidates that are, and make sure that those are candidates that are accountable to the community. And a number of ways that you can do that is talk to these candidates. If they don't know about what it takes to hold systems accountable, teach them about it. And if they're willing to stand with the people, then let's be in their corner. And if they're not, let's make sure that we insert our own people so that we can have people in these positions of power so that we can change and work toward a system that doesn't kill us in perpetuity. And lastly, in Orange County, a big focus is we need to get this district attorney out. Todd Spitzer is on the record saying he would never prosecute a cop due to his 10 years with LAPD. That right there sets a precedent for police culture that if I, on a bad day as a police officer, choose to abuse a member of the public, we have a DA that is openly saying, I won't prosecute you. And his record reflects that. And that's why there are so many families that are traumatized and hurt. So what we need to do is we need to start paying attention to these positions of power and taking these people out of those positions and inserting people that are going to lead with empathy, compassion, and govern in equity. And that's what we're doing in Orange County. And I can assure you, when my cousin was murdered, all of us had a lot to say in my family. And I had a message October 7th at a council meeting. And I said, I'm not trying to talk to Anaheim Police Department. I'm not interested. But I am interested in getting to their bosses. And that message was a message to the politicians that hold these systems and these and uphold these violent systems for what they are and don't check them. That if you don't do what's right, we will take you out of your position, and we will make sure that the people that are elected are people that are going to center the experiences of those impacted by injustice. And in Orange County, I have a lot of faith that with the loss of my cousin Brandon, there is a fire that has been ignited across the county of Orange, that people are starting to pay attention. And I have a lot of faith that in Orange County, everything from the DA to the councils to the congressional seats, we're going to start to see a change. And it's going to start to shift from special interest to serving people. And we won't ever stop fighting until the people win.
Wow. That's, incredibly well said. A lot of things people can do at a lot of different levels, right? From just voting, listening, engaging, sharing, talking about it. Is there any website at all? Is there any social media account in particular? Anything like that that we could direct people to or share?
Yeah. There is an Instagram account for Brandon, and it's for all the work centered around him, and it's Justice for Brandon Lopez on Instagram. And yeah, this account will be very active in the near future. And there's a lot of pictures of him. There's lots of memories on my cousin Brandon. But that is one outlet that people can see Brandon. And in addition to that, he was a very talented tattoo artist, and hundreds of people have his artwork on him all throughout the state of California. So I'm sure, people will meet people that he's tattooed, and because of those beautiful people that carry his art, Brandon's always with us.
So I really thank you for sharing all of this. And again, it's like you'd have to experience it to even understand how hard it could be to talk about this, share it. And I don't take that lightly, and I know that it's so meaningful for people watching. It's so needed for other families affected to see this and hear this, and people who didn't know that this happens, right? And just it's another example. It's one of the many times it does happen, but here we can really take a moment, listen, like laugh, and like speak well and learn. And so I really just thank you both so much for allowing this to be shared.
And I've already told you, my man, I can't thank you enough. It's very humbling to see how you use your platform and to see how you give so many people that feel like they've had their voice taken from them a voice. And there's not a whole lot of platforms that feel safe for families when they go through this, but you've created a community here of people that are fighting and striving for justice. And every day, as we work toward this with you, it feels like we're getting closer and closer.
Nothing but privilege to help and be there for you anyway. So really.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you so much, man. And you guys, have a wonderful night. And I think for my aunt and I, when we went through this and you helped publish that video that we sent you, it helped us so much get his story out there. And thankfully, we've been able to help make sure that the right narrative was out there. All the major media, thankfully told the right story. And that's that Brandon was somebody who didn't deserve that. The public media didn't demonize him, that it shined a light that, something very broken continues to happen with these police departments. And I credit a large part of how you helped tell that story. So thank you.
I'm honored, man, and really anything I can do.
Shout out Mr. Checkpoint. Hey, FTP. There's killers up in these streets. Always film the police. They keep feeding us to the beast. Always film the police. They kill us up in these streets. Always film the police. Gotta be our own keepers of peace. Gotta have police, the police. Gotta have police, the police.